On what should have been one of the happiest days of his life, a 14-year-old boy walked into his teacher's classroom at Sycamore Middle School in Gridley, California. It was his 8th grade graduation day, June 2021. The sun was shining, families were arriving, and excitement filled the hallways. But what happened behind that locked classroom door would haunt him for years to come. The teacher he trusted, the woman he admired, was about to commit the ultimate betrayal. And the most disturbing part? The school had been warned. They knew something wasn't right. But they did nothing. This is the story of Michelle Cis, a 43-year-old wife and mother of 2, who groomed and sexually assaulted her 14-year-old student. And this is the story of how a school district failed to protect him. Michelle Cis seemed like a dedicated teacher at Sycamore Middle School. She was friendly, engaging, and the students seemed to like her. But beneath the surface, something sinister was brewing. It started innocently enough. Or at least that's what the 14-year-old boy thought. In the weeks leading up to 8th grade graduation, Cis began following the boy on Instagram. At first it felt harmless. A teacher showing interest in her student's life. Maybe she was just being friendly. Maybe she cared about her students. That's what he thought. The messages started small. Casual conversations. Compliments. Nothing that raised immediate alarm bells. But then, slowly things began to change. The messages became more frequent. More personal. More inappropriate. Cis started sending photos. Not just any photos. Explicit, naked photos of herself. 4 separate images that no 14-year-old child should ever receive from an adult, let alone their teacher. The boy was confused. He was flattered by the attention at first, like many victims of grooming are. Here was an adult, someone in a position of authority and trust, paying special attention to him. Felt good. Until it didn't. But what this boy didn't know was that he wasn't the only one noticing Michelle Cis' unusual behavior. Other students had seen it too. And so had the school administration. According to investigators, Michelle Cis had been warned multiple times about her inappropriate behavior with students. She was acting less like a teacher and more like an 8th grader herself. She was spending unusual amounts of time with male students. Getting too friendly. Too casual. Too close. Female students in her class noticed something strange. They told investigators that Cis seemed to want them out of the classroom. What? So she could be alone with the boys. So she could flirt with them without witnesses. The administration had conversations with Cis. They told her she was being too friendly with students. That she needed to maintain professional boundaries. That her behavior wasn't appropriate. But the warnings didn't stop her. If anything, she became more careful. More calculated. More manipulative. During the 2020 to 2021 school year, Cis began giving this particular 14-year-old boy special attention. She told him she wanted to help him with his homework. She asked him to stay after school. To spend time alone with her in her classroom. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Cis didn't just act alone. She enlisted help. She had another school employee, a yard duty supervisor, write passes for the boy. Passes that would allow him to leave his other activities during recess and lunch to spend time alone with her. Behind closed doors. In her locked classroom. Think about that for a moment. Other adults at this school were unknowingly helping a predator gain access to her victim. Were they blind to what was happening? Or had they simply never been trained to recognize the warning signs? Either way, the system was failing this child. June 2021. 8th grade graduation day at Sycamore Middle School. For most students, this was a day of celebration. The end of middle school. The beginning of a new chapter. Families gathered in the auditorium. Kids wore their best clothes. There were flowers, cameras, and excitement in the air. But for one 14-year-old boy, this day would become a nightmare he would never forget. That morning, before the graduation ceremony began, Michelle Cis called the boy into her classroom. He thought nothing of it at first. Maybe she wanted to congratulate him. Maybe she had something to give him for graduation. He trusted her. He walked into the classroom. And then he heard it. The sound that would echo in his mind for years to come. Click. Michelle Cis locked the classroom door. What happened next, according to District Attorney Mike Ramsey, was a calculated sexual assault. Cis, a 43-year-old woman, forced herself on this 14-year-old child. There was no consent. There was no choice. There was only confusion, shock, and violation. The boy later told investigators that he felt he had been raped. Those were his words. I felt I had been raped. This wasn't a fantasy. This wasn't a teenage dream. This was a crime. A betrayal of trust. A theft of innocence. And it happened just hours before this child was supposed to walk across the stage and celebrate his graduation. District Attorney Mike Ramsey described the case as particularly disgusting. Here was a teacher who had groomed this child through social media, sent him explicit photos, and then, on one of the most important days of his young life, locked him in a room and sexually assaulted him. The boy walked out of that classroom a different person. His friends noticed. His family noticed. Something had changed. Something was deeply, terribly wrong. But he didn't tell anyone. Not yet. For over 2 years the boy carried this secret. The shame. The confusion. The trauma. He didn't brag about what happened. He didn't tell his friends. He didn't seek attention. Because this wasn't something he wanted. This was something that was done to him. Against his will. But in October 2023, everything changed. One of Michelle Cis' nude photographs was discovered by another adult. It's unclear exactly how this happened, but once it was found, an investigation was launched. Police in Gridley, California began looking into Michelle Cis' relationship with her students. And that's when the truth began to surface. Investigators found the Instagram messages between Cis and the boy. They found the explicit photos she had sent. They discovered the pattern of grooming that had been going on for months. They also found something else. Evidence that the school district had known about Cis' inappropriate behavior with students. That she had been warned. That there had been complaints. But the warnings hadn't been enough. The complaints hadn't led to action. And a child had paid the price. Michelle Cis was arrested and charged with sexual assault of a minor. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The messages, the photos, the testimony from the victim and other students who had witnessed her inappropriate behavior. In the summer of 2024, Michelle Cis was sentenced to 4 years in a California state prison. 4 years for stealing a child's innocence. 4 years for betraying the trust that parents and students place in teachers every single day. But for the victim, 4 years didn't feel like justice. Not when the school district that was supposed to protect him had failed so catastrophically. And so he decided to sue. Represented by attorney Mark Boscovich, the now young adult victim filed a civil lawsuit against Michelle Cis and the Gridley Unified School District. The lawsuit makes several serious allegations. That the district knew or should have known that Cis was grooming male students. That they failed to properly supervise her despite multiple warnings. That they negligently allowed her to continue having access to vulnerable children. The suit claims that Cis used her relationships with other school staff members to gain access to students. That she manipulated the system. That she exploited the trust placed in her. But perhaps most damning is the allegation that the district failed to train its employees on recognizing the warning signs of grooming and predatory behavior. That yard duty supervisors were writing passes for a student to spend time alone with a teacher, and they had no idea they were helping facilitate abuse. You would think that when a young man came forward to hold his abuser and the system that failed him accountable, the community would support him. You would think that people would rally around this victim and demand change. But that's not what happened. According to his attorney, the victim faced harassment. People in his small community gave him dirty looks. Some flipped him off in public. Some made it clear they were on Michelle Cis' side, not his. What? Was it because they knew Cis personally? Because they couldn't believe a teacher could do such a thing? Because they bought into the harmful stereotype that teenage boys should be grateful for sexual attention from older women? Whatever the reason, this young man found himself isolated and attacked for telling the truth. For seeking justice. For trying to make sure this never happens to another child. His attorney, Mark Boscovich, described the emotional toll this has taken. Sleepless nights. Feelings of isolation. The pain of being blamed for something that was done to him. But despite the backlash, the victim pressed forward with the lawsuit. Not just for himself but for other potential victims. To force the school district to change. To ensure that teachers are properly trained. That warning signs aren't ignored. That children are protected. The case of Michelle Cis raises disturbing questions that extend far beyond one classroom in Gridley, California. How many warnings does it take before a school takes action? How many red flags need to be raised before someone steps in to protect a child? According to the investigation, Cis had been warned about being too friendly with students. Female students had noticed she wanted them out of the room so she could be alone with boys. Other teachers had seen her unusual behavior. But somehow she was still allowed in a classroom. Still allowed access to children. Still given the opportunity to groom and assault a 14-year-old boy. This case also highlights the dangerous stereotype that persists around male victims of sexual abuse. The myth that boys should feel lucky. That this is every teenage boy's fantasy. that it's not really abuse if the perpetrator is an attractive woman. But this victim's experience tells a very different story. He didn't feel lucky. He felt violated, confused, betrayed. He described what happened to him as rape, because that's what it was. Male victims of sexual abuse are often dismissed, mocked, or not believed. They're told they should have enjoyed it, that they're weak for being affected by it, that they should just man up and move on. But trauma doesn't discriminate by gender. Abuse is abuse. And a 14-year-old child, regardless of gender, cannot consent to a sexual relationship with a 43-year-old adult in a position of power. The civil lawsuit is still in its early stages. Discovery will reveal more about what the school district knew and when they knew it. There may be documents, emails, reports that show a pattern of negligence. Attorney Mark Boscovich hopes that as the case moves forward, others with information will come forward. Because often, it takes one brave person to speak up before others find the courage to share their stories. Michelle Cis is now serving her 4-year sentence in a California prison. But the damage she caused will last far longer than 4 years. The boy she assaulted is now a young adult, still processing the trauma, still dealing with the betrayal, still facing judgment from his community. The question now is whether the Gridley Unified School District will be held accountable for their failures. Whether they will implement real changes to protect students. Whether they will finally take the warning signs seriously. The case of Michelle Cis is a stark reminder that predators can be anyone. Teachers, coaches, mentors, family members. They don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like trusted adults who seem to care. But this case is also a reminder that systems fail when they ignore warning signs. When they don't take complaints seriously. When they prioritize reputation over child safety. One locked classroom door. One graduation day. One child's life forever changed. Michelle Cis is behind bars. But the fight for justice and accountability continues. What do you think about this case? Should the school district be held responsible? How can we better protect students from predators in positions of trust? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and let's hear your thoughts in the comments section below.
Welcome to the Case File. Here, every crime has a story, every mystery leaves a trail, and every detail could be the difference between truth and deception. From assassinations that shook the nation, to manhunts that gripped entire cities, we uncover the raw, unfiltered events behind the headlines. These are not just stories. They are lives, choices, and consequences. The files are open, the cases are real, and the truth is waiting to be found. This is the Case File. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the next case might be the one that changes everything.